Good evening. My name is Jason Wallace. I'm the pastor of Christ Presbyterian Church here in the Salt Lake Valley, and we welcome you to another installment of the Ancient Paths. Friday before last, the Salt Lake Tribune reported that in response to Pastor Terry Jones of Florida burning a copy of the Koran, that a local congregation, Wasatch Presbyterian Church, had donated $600 towards the purchase of Korans to be given away. We are privileged to have with us Pastor Scott Delgarno, the pastor of Wasatch Presbyterian, to discuss this with us this evening. And just as a matter of clarification, this is sponsored by Christ Presbyterian, which is a congregation of the Orthodox Presbyterian denomination, and Wasatch is part of the mainline Presbyterian Church USA. So we're Presbyterians, but of different denominations. So it's a great privilege to have you with us this evening, Pastor Delgarno.
Great to talk to you, Jason.
So tell us about the giving away of Korans.
Okay. Well, let me, by way of correction, say that technically it's really the leadership of the Presbyterian Church that chose to do this, not the entire church. It all started back, actually, when I was pastor of Westminster Presbyterian Church in Portland, Oregon last September, when Terry Jones originally threatened to burn a Koran. We were having a board meeting just a week before, and I always like to do some sort of educational moment before we get into the business, so that everyone realizes it's not just a business meeting, it's sort of worshipful work. Anyway, so I just asked the board to get into small groups and discuss together why we weren't going to burn a Koran. We knew we weren't going to burn one, but I didn't want them to just say, well, just because it's a cockamamie idea. So people took time, and they talked in their groups about the fact that we are Christians who believe that it's good to follow your conscience. We understood that Terry Jones and his church did what they did out of conscience, but that one thing that makes us especially Presbyterian, uniquely Presbyterian, or what stands out in our way of doing things is that we always believe that conscience needs to be informed by education. Otherwise, we do things and sometimes people get killed, as happened. So anyway, this was last September. We went together with a small independent bookstore very close to Westminster in the northeast part of Portland. We ended up purchasing 100 copies of the Koran, which were given away. It took about a week to do. And the whole thing passed over when Terry Jones was pretty much talked down by Robert Gates and other important figures. So I became pastor of Wasatch this last January 1st. Didn't think I'd ever revisit Terry Jones or anything like that again, but then I was looking at the New York Times around the 20th of March and saw that, lo and behold, their church had held this mock trial and burned a Koran, and as you know, within a week, 20 innocent people were dead, a number of them UN aid workers. We had a board meeting, and I brought it up again. I said pretty much the same thing. I said, is this something we should just ignore? Because a lot of people have felt, particularly in the media this time, that maybe Pastor Jones got too much airtime the first time this happened. or should we do something about it? And the feeling was that the leadership of the church very well ought to do it, that if we didn't do it, it would in some way be saying that it was an okay thing to do. And we also felt that when people burn holy books, everybody's holy book is in danger. If a Christian burns a copy of the Quran, then we may just have everybody burning Bibles. And so we wanted to take one small, measured, symbolic action that might say we don't stand with Pastor Terry Jones, that there are Christians who feel very differently about these matters and value education and aren't afraid of the bit of wisdom in other holy books.
I'm curious what you were thinking to accomplish in this in terms of, you seem to be protesting Terry Jones's burning of the Quran, but did you also protest the reaction of the Muslims in terms of killing 20 people in response to it? I mean, why bother?
Well, we found out in doing it, I immediately got responses from Afghanistan, from a gentleman who works in support of the troops there, who said, awesome, this is exactly the kind of thing that we needed to hear so that people in Afghanistan and Iraq and other places would know that there are Christians who don't sanction Terry Jones. So I think in that sense, we were standing up against what was done. I understand that Terry Jones didn't act alone, that his action was inflamed by Hamid Karzai and others. We didn't think of worldwide ramifications exactly. We felt that, the Presbyterian thing to do in this case was to provide some Korans for people in Salt Lake City who might wonder whether Terry Jones was correct. And that the Muslim Holy Book was a provocateur of violence first, and that, if they decided that, having read the book, fine. We aren't here to tell them what to believe. But at the same time, it seemed to us clearly that the way to act against the burning of a book is to invite people, for heaven's sake, just read it if you want.
You put a bookmark in each book that said that this book has been donated by the leadership of Wasatch Presbyterian Church, who believe that, who are not afraid of truth wherever it can be found, or something along those lines.
Right.
What truth do you think can be found in the Quran?
It's not primarily, what we were doing, again, wasn't primarily about the Quran. I've said in other forums that had someone burned the Book of Mormon, we would have done the same thing. Again, if you burn anybody's holy book, pretty soon all our holy books are in danger. And we were careful when we put that bookmark together to not say we're not afraid of finding the truth other places. We believe very strongly in Jesus Christ. Because we're as firm in our faith as we are, we're not afraid to buy a few copies of the Quran, invite other people to read it. But at the same time, we know that anybody who's looked at the Quran knows that there are some of the teachings of Jesus in it. Ironically, one of the teachings that's very strong in the third chapter is you should turn the other cheek if someone wounds you. So we kind of hope people might stumble on some of that and say, oh, isn't it interesting that different holy books from different religions might in fact say some of the same thing, have some of the same truths in them.
I'm curious with your use of terms there, because the term holy book is something that's often tossed around. It's obvious that there are people who consider it to be holy. Do you recognize it as a holy book on its own? Do you recognize it as some source of truth in addition to the Bible?
I'm only speaking of it in terms of the fact that its adherents call it a holy book, just as we call the Bible our holy book. It's our prime place where we go for guidance and understanding and meaning and purpose. And I'm sure that's the way Muslims feel about the Quran. I don't feel that personally, but I'm not a Muslim.
The Quran teaches that Jesus is not the Son of God. It teaches that he was only an apostle, a prophet, and that it's blasphemous to say that he was the Son of God. It says that he was not crucified and he didn't rise from the dead. So the very core of Christianity is flatly denied in the Quran. So why would the church believe that it's part of their ministry to share these? I mean,
Well,
and what truth is it that they were finding there?
I think I pretty much answered it by saying that when one person's book is burned, all people's books are in danger, and that's why we did it. We're not promoting. We never at any point in this said we're promoting Islam, and we never at any point said we're promoting the Quran. We were, in fact, a number of television reporters who took my picture and interviewed me asked if they could take a picture of me holding the Quran, and I said no, because this is not about the Quran. As I said earlier, had someone burned a copy of the Book of Mormon, we probably would have ponied up $600 to offer copies of the Book of Mormon at King's English Bookstore as well. It's about civility. It's about not living in fear. I mean, a lot of people are defining Christianity in terms of two things, fear and hate. And we pretty much are the Christians, and I imagine maybe you are too, that define Christianity from the point of view of civility and hope.
Well, the Bible instructs us that a servant of the Lord is not to be quarrelsome, that we're to speak the truth in love, that we're to give a reason for the hope that lies within us with meekness. But we also seem to live in this postmodern age where truth is considered to be a very relative matter, and that was the...
Yeah, it's not about whether truth is relative or absolute at all. It's about respecting people and letting them choose on their own whatever capital T truth they want to follow. That's so central to Presbyterianism. Again, we believe that Christ alone is Lord of the conscience, and not a minister, and not a body, not a bishop. We don't have any bishops or anything like that. No, I'm sure you probably don't either. And I don't stand in the pulpit and tell people what to believe. Though I remember in the first church I served back in the 1980s, a member of my church came to me and said, just tell us what to believe. And I thought, that I would be abdicating my responsibility as a minister if I did that, because I think we're on this earth to do two things. I say this a lot to my folks, and that is to wake up and to grow up. I think that's the core of the message of the Bible, and the growing up part of it is being responsible for our own selves. So I have no problem with people reading any book and making up their own mind whether they want to follow teachings that are there.
I would agree with you in part in that I think it's fine for people to read the Quran and to judge its message, but I mean, you said at the heart of Presbyterianism, but I mean, historically Presbyterianism has said that the Bible is our only infallible rule of faith and practice. Mm-hmm.
And you use the word our, but I'm not talking about what other people believe.
Yeah, but I mean,
it is our only guide. That's true.
But historically, I mean, it's not a personal truth in terms of something relative that I get to choose whatever truth I want to recognize. Historically, Presbyterians have been very clear that this is the truth, mm-hmm. and that whether people recognize it or not, people may deceive themselves, but that there is truth that can be known. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious.
We're not the only people in the world, and we're not the only church in the world. And I tell people when they come to our church, especially if they come to new members classes, I always say, if you're looking for the one true church, this isn't it. I mean, if we define ourselves as Presbyterians as anything at all, we are not the one true church, because we don't believe there is any one true church. We follow the Bible. Every Sunday I preach from what's called the lectionary, which is a collection of texts that take us through the Bible in 3 years. So my people, I teach like crazy, and I'm a Jesus freak, and I'm absolutely dedicated to Scripture. I dream it. I mean, it's just in me, and that's our church and that's our belief. But if anybody is born in Saudi Arabia and all they've ever known is the Quran, I hope they find some truth there.
I want to come back to that. Your book of confession still includes the Westminster Confession of Faith. It says in there that all churches are going to be some mixture of truth and error, but there are going to be some churches who have so wandered from the truth that they cease to be churches at all, but are synagogues of Satan. Do you recognize that there are churches that they have so abandoned the truth that they are no churches at all? I mean, what's your view there?
I have not spent any time deciding whether or not someone else's church is of God or not. I'm pretty much focused on the ministry I have at hand that I consider myself called to. That's enough for every day, 24 hours. So I just don't see, life is short. Why would we spend time judging other people? Again, our approach with Terry Jones was simply to say, okay, there's someone who followed his conscience. God is his judge. We are not his judge. In our own place, we decided, we're going to follow our conscience. We're going to make sure it's guided by education. And again, if people want to read this book and decide for themselves whether it incites people to violence, let them do it. God made us individual human beings.
I'm curious about the statement you made before, because I want to come back to that. You said if someone's been born in Saudi Arabia and this is what they've read and you hope they find some truth in it, do you believe that a Muslim can be right with God apart from Jesus Christ?
I, pretty much going back to what I said, I have no idea. That's between them and God. We have our book, and we support missionaries in the Presbyterian denomination. We put the word out there. I'm hopeful, that our own little action here, which has gotten a lot more press around the world than I ever dreamed, might end up with perhaps some imam someday down the road passing out Bibles himself. I mean, who knows what's going to happen? I can't control that.
The Muslim world, by and large, seems to have a much stronger view of truth and error. The Bible is actually legally banned. In this country, you have the pastor of this non-denominational church of a few dozen people down in Florida who takes it on himself to conduct this trial and burn the Quran. But in Saudi Arabia, it can be a death sentence to have a Bible.
But you understand that Islam is just about as many-faceted as Christianity.
Oh, I
that there are
understand.
Sufi Muslims even in the outskirts of Saudi Arabia. There are Sufi Muslims in Iran that would have no trouble with anything I'm saying tonight.
But what percentage of Islam does Sufism make up?
It doesn't matter, even if it's 50, even if it's only 15%. I'd
It's
consider
less than
that
1%.
Oh, I think it's a lot larger than that.
The Sunnis make up about 85%, and the Shia make up almost all the rest. You have a few other splinter groups out there, but all the schools. There's four major schools of interpretation of law in Sunnism, and the Shia would actually agree. They disagree about a number of things within the specifics of Islam, but they are all agreed in terms of suppressing other religions, either making them pay the tax or seeking protection from Islam. They don't force conversion per se, but you have to pay the tax and you have to basically submit to their repressions.
I'll say this, that One thing that's significantly different about Islam from, say, Christianity is that Islam has never had a reformation. But I will say this, we may very well be living in a time when that reformation is underway. It's been interesting to see how a lot of people think that I've gotten reactions of some people saying, "Don't you realize that that all Muslims everywhere want to kill us?" And that's all they're about. It doesn't matter who they are. If they're Muslim, that's their mission. They won't say that to your face, but they'll kill you at night. I mean, I've actually heard this spouted to me, and I kind of want to say to those people, have you been paying attention in the last 3 months? We just finally found Osama bin Laden, and his death, I think, marks the end of a kind of Islam that probably will continue to be spouted, of course, for a while. But I think its death knell was rung with the bullet that took him out. We're finding out now that young Muslim people with cell phones are infinitely more powerful than anybody who follows Osama bin Laden and carries a gun. People in Egypt and Libya and Tunisia and Syria and on and on and on are asking for liberty, who are wanting to be tolerant of the world. It is just an incredible wind that's blowing, and no one can deny it. And much of the Muslim world has seen and has told us that Osama bin Laden is little more than an embarrassment to them. So the world, I mean, I hear what you're saying about, this strict Islam, but everything tells me that that is going to go away. There'll always be pockets, just as there will always be Terry Joneses. But the main movement in this world is toward liberty and tolerance, civility and respect, mutual respect.
We'll come back to that. I want to go ahead and open up our phone lines. If you'd like to join in the conversation, the phone number here is 801-973-TV20. That's 801-973-8820. We have with us Pastor Scott Dalgarno of Wasatch Presbyterian Church. We're talking about his congregation, or the leadership of the congregation's decision to purchase Korans to be given away.
We should tell people that there are no more Korans left. I think they all left the station. People were at the door of King's English on Monday when they started giving them away, and they were gone very quickly. Okay.
I'm curious with your perspective in terms of competing claims of truth. If a young man comes to me who has been a member of our congregation and says that he has fallen in love with a young woman who is, say, Mormon, and that she has encouraged him to pray to know whether the Book of Mormon is true, and he's received this burning in his bosom, and he sees all these wonderful things, and he's wanting to know what he should do. And I can tell him Joseph Smith was a false prophet. This is another gospel that is a counterfeit of the truth, and that it will lead him to hell. What is your perspective of the same situation? What would you tell a young man in that kind of situation in your congregation?
Well, I'd want to know from him if he's marrying, if he's giving up his own faith. If somebody says they're going to give up their faith to marry somebody, I wonder how much else of themselves they're going to want to give up. You want to see two people come together and happily marry their lives, we have in our own congregation some people who are married to Mormons, and they spend a little time, in the ward, and they spend a lot of time with us, and God will, sort that out in the end, I imagine.
So when the LDS say that we have the same, they say that they have the same truth that all other Christians have, but they have more. If someone says they're receiving a burning in their bosom and that it's making them very happy, and they think they've discovered new truth here, can you really oppose them? I mean, if they're convinced that that they're seeing all these wonderful things in some other faith, is there some basis on which you can tell them you're in error?
I find that generally just drives people, away from you rather than brings them toward you. An open spirit, I'm not going to pretend that I don't have my own beliefs. I'm not going to say, well, the Book of Mormon means as much to me as the Bible, because it doesn't. I might, if that person was open to talking about the issue, as I hope he would be, we could go through all that together and compare those notes in private. In the end, he makes his choices. I'll understand that. I'll have to honor it. But again, his own soul, he's responsible for that. And as a pastor, I offer, my understanding of truth, but I will never take away a person's, right to decide for himself what he's going to do. And who knows where that person will, go with his or her faith in time.
Do you believe that there is a literal heaven and hell at stake in these decisions?
That's a good question. I believe very much in life after death. I'm an English major. I did a graduate degree in literature, and I taught Italian Renaissance literature in Italy after graduation from college. And I'm highly impressed and influenced by Dante's Divine Comedy. Dante, posits a hell and a purgatory. And if you look really carefully at his writing, I think it's just phenomenal. He posits a hell that I can believe in. Let me tell you what I mean. The hell that Dante comes up with is a place where God loves people so much that God gives them a place to be away from God if that's what they choose. If they are so, wrapped up in themselves and in the choices they've made that they do not want to be with God forever, then God loves them so infinitely and so much that God provides that place. And as you go with Dante in the Inferno on a tour of hell, you see all these people who they are trapped completely inside themselves. And that is the place they are. The purgatory has all pretty much the same structure as hell. The difference is those people aren't narcissists. They want to be with God. They've committed, in some cases, unspeakable things. But in community, they work together to find heaven. I've told congregations I've served that a bit of wisdom that I borrowed from Thich Nhat Hanh, a Vietnamese Buddhist, seems to me to have truth. And he says, we're on this earth in order to wake up from the illusion of our own separateness. I think Jesus says the very same thing. Thich Nhat Hanh just said it in a very succinct manner, and that I come right down on that. So is there a literal hell? I wouldn't doubt it for a bit. God has set aside some place for people to be away from God if that's what they choose.
You seem to discount the wrath of God, though.
I do.
So
we're not about fear, and we're not about hate. We're about civility, and we're about hope.
We are able to show mercy as we've been shown mercy, but Jesus himself spoke of the wrath of God repeatedly.
Yeah,
I mean,
and I disagree with that. That's where I really come down. I think
is it that
you probably would say yourself that there are portions of the Bible that come down to us directly from the mouth of Christ, and then there are those things that were added by the church later, some of which were written to keep people, quiet in the pews. one of those things that Jesus is said to have said a number of times in Mark and other Gospels is to speak of this lake of fire where the fire is never quenched and the worm never dies. And I would stake and I am, I guess, staking my immortal soul, that Jesus never said that. It sounds like nothing he said. It doesn't sound at all like his words about the kingdom of heaven, in which a table is prepared and no one is excluded except those who choose themselves not to come, which goes along perfectly with Dante's idea of hell. It has nothing to do with the story of the prodigal son. I mean, over and over and over again, the teachings of Jesus that we know came from his heart have nothing to do with something that was probably said by some version of a pope 200 or 300 years after Jesus.
I have to come back to that, but we've had our callers on hold
Fine.
for a while now. We'll go ahead and go to our first call. Ray from Syracuse. Ray, good to have you with us.
Hello.
You're on the air.
Am I on the air?
Yes, you are.
Hi, Ray.
Go ahead, Ray.
Yes, I'm not hearing you.
Go ahead.
Are you there?
Yes, we
Yes.
are.
Wonderful. I would like to say that I support, I never heard what you did before, Pastor Scott, but it sounds like that I support you very much from what I've heard that you've done.
Well, thank you.
Are you there?
I am. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, it's wonderful. When I moved to Utah, before that, I was never faced with persecution before. But when I went to conference, I was faced with persecution, Christians persecuting Christians. I was so shocked with it. And then that show of Sean McCraney's, I was so shocked with Christians persecuting Christians. And I was so shocked with it that, I became a Christian by reading the Bible, and the love that I felt in the Bible, I'm really touched by what you've done with passing the Quran out. I think that is a Christian act, what you've done. I'm really touched by that.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. We have with us Connie from Korans. Connie, good to have you with us this evening. Connie? Hello, Connie.
Hello.
You're on the air.
Hello.
You're on the air.
Are you there?
Apparently we're having some technical difficulty. Connie, you're on the air.
I would just like to. I would like to ask a couple of questions of your pastor. And number one, does he realize that Islam is not just a religious, entity? It is also political.
I'm sure there are segments of Islam that are very political, like there are political segments in Judaism and Christianity as well.
No, but it's mostly run by. In their Quran, they also have that if they go after people and states, and they go after people, states, and everything, and if you don't take their religion, upon you, they eliminate you. I mean, they don't give you a choice like we have. That's exactly what their agenda is to take over everything and everybody.
That was
Did
certainly.
you realize that?
That was
Just
certainly.
because Osama bin Laden was taken out, they haven't given up on the United States or the Jews. That's exactly what they want to do.
Well, I don't.
And in the Quran, they tell you in the Quran, they have a free will too. They can lie. They can do all these things that we are told not to do in order to meet their objective. Does he realize that?
There is among fundamentalist Islam that segment that Robert J. Lipton spoke of this. He speaks of it as the fundamentalist impulse. He says it's in many religions. And that is an impulse to destroy the world in order to save it. And so there are those people. Certainly Osama bin Laden was Exhibit A And it's interesting to see, there's very few people in Muslim states who are weeping for him right now, basically because he didn't stop with the killing of Americans on 9/11. He killed many, many, many Muslims himself, because the only Muslim he was happy with was himself, and the only Muslim faith he was happy with was the Muslim faith that he learned from someone named Sayyid Qutb, who wrote a 32-volume commentary on the Quran and filled it with hate and anger and every kind of violence that you can imagine. So there are people who are there. Normally they cut their own throats. As you can see, Osama bin Laden was pretty much alone at the end of his life. There weren't troops and troops and troops around his compound at all.
If you'd like to join in the conversation, our phone number here is 801-973-TB20. That's 801-973-8820. We have with us Pastor Scott Dalgarno of Wasatch Presbyterian, a congregation of the Presbyterian Church USA, the mainline Presbyterian denomination. Going back to your interpretation of the Scriptures, often we hear people say that there are all these different interpretations of the Bible, but I think it's helpful to be clear. You assume that the Bible it has not been preserved. That the Bible includes things that you can reject because you don't believe that Christ said. I mean, you were quoting earlier from Jesus talking about a lake of fire and things like this. When you come to the Scriptures, it's not that you look at those Scriptures and try to interpret them within the context of everything else and believe they are the Word of God. You reject those out of hand. Is that?
Well, I think I'm just willing to say what every Christian probably would say deep within his heart. I'm not talking about rejecting most times out of hand. I just say that we all have what we call the canon within the canon. There's the canon of Scripture, which is the 66 books and all those teachings. But I've never met anyone who said that every word that's said in every book is as good or as important for their own life and the guidance of their life as every other word.
But you're going beyond that, though, aren't you? Because I mean,
in this case, I am. Yeah.
I mean, it's not the same as saying that a genealogy in the Book of Numbers is as important as the Sermon on the Mount. It's a matter that
I am saying that, and I think a lot of Christians would say the same thing.
But you're saying that where Jesus talks about the wrath of God, that doesn't belong in the Bible.
I didn't say it doesn't belong in the Bible at all. I say it's not. I don't believe it comes from the mouth of Jesus, and therefore I don't value it as much. There are. The Bible is interesting. You've got the book of Joshua that calls Jews to kill every Canaanite, regardless whether they're men, women, or children. And I blanch at what I read in that book. But thank God, right after Joshua, we have a book called Ruth, in which a woman from Moab is honored and becomes, in fact, the great-grandmother or the grandmother of King David. So the wonderful thing about the Bible is that it corrects itself. It continually does that.
So
you have teachings in Proverbs that are very, very different from Ecclesiastes that says vanity of vanity. I think anyone who reads the Bible really seriously and closely and carefully realizes that it doesn't always speak with the same voice and sometimes actually contradicts itself. I know you're not, by the look on your face, I see you don't believe that, but I bet some of your viewers do.
I understand that there are probably numerous ones that do, but that's not what your Book of Confession says, is it? Your Book of Confession says that it has been providentially preserved,
right?
And that it is.
This is the difference between your denomination of Presbyterianism and mine. We take a vow to be guided by our confessions. We don't take a vow to be instructed as if the Book of Confessions and every verse of it nailed our feet to the floor. We look at it and I accept it for the spirit with which it comes. You always have to read things in context. I'll say, some people have said, well, if you'd read the book of the Quran, you'd understand it's, awful. There are verses in there that'll make the hair on your arm stand up. One place says, you kill the heathen where you find them. But if you know about the background of the Quran, you know the history of it, you know that it comes out of a time when Muhammad and his group were under fire from the Meccans, and they were looking for teaching from their prophet as to whether or not they could defend themselves if they were under attack. And some of them believed they couldn't. And out comes this teaching, and others that say you can do this in self-defense. You have to read the whole thing. You have to understand it in context. You have to understand it in the historical context. And so I don't say today that we ought to kill all the Canaanites, all the people in the Holy Land who aren't Jews. I don't live by that. And I don't live by every line in the confessions either.
Do you know of any Presbyterian in the last several hundred years who has believed that the command to kill the Canaanites is something that's bound on us?
I mean, no, but you know what I'm saying, though. I'm saying that
there's a difference in saying that
the argument is, the burden of the argument is with you to prove that every verse in the confessions and the Bible is completely in keeping with every other Bible, that they all run in the same direction, that they're never opposed. Anybody who reads it for 20 minutes will understand that there is opposition, and you have to make up your mind how you're going to deal with it.
But John Calvin didn't. John Knox didn't.
Oh, John Calvin very much did. They had no trouble, and neither did Luther. Oh, we disagree entirely then, because those people understood that the Bible didn't always speak with the same voice, and you can see that in Calvin's commentaries, particularly his commentary on the Romans. You can just see that.
What is it that Calvin says there, that he says that the Bible contradicts itself?
And he's saying that there are different teachings that have different weight. That's the kind of thing we're talking about. That's exactly what you have to weigh.
But he would argue that all of it is the Word of God, and all of it is to be followed, and that it speaks with one voice.
Jason, I understand that this is where you come from. It's your heart and soul.
But it's also
the Calvinist Presbyterianism.
But this is also the historic teaching of the Presbyterian Church. It's Calvin, Knox. You go through, just about whoever you want to pick up until the last 100 years. And the confessions were the statement of what they believed the Bible taught, and they believed that the Bible was providentially preserved in its entirety, that it was the whole 66 books. It's not that...
The one thing that you're not saying about the confessions is that, and I don't know if our viewers give a hoot about Presbyterian confessions, but the reason why we still allow new confessions to come is because we believe there's more light that's coming from God. And that's why we had the brief statement of faith in our own denomination that came out of 1983, actually after the reunion of the Southern and the Northern Church. Interestingly, it came because the church had split over the subject of slavery back in the 1830s or 40s, I forgot when it was.
1860 was the...
Well, that's when the war, but we split before then.
The founding of you had the 1836 division between old school and new school, but the division in the old school over slavery was 1860 with the founding of the Presbyterian Church of the Confederate States, Augusta, Georgia.
There we go.
Woodrow Wilson's father was pastor.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, let's squeeze in a couple of calls. We have with us Connie from Salt Lake. Connie, good to have you with us. Connie?
Is that not the Connie we had before? I
don't know. Connie? Going once.
Hello?
You're on the air. Hello?
Hello?
Hello? We're apparently having some technical problems.
I would like to ask your pastor.
Oh, it's the same thing.
If he is a Christian pastor, why don't you believe everything? Why are you asking questions about whether the Bible is all true or not? Why are you questioning it?
I'm just pointing out what most people believe, and that is that the Bible is written over many hundred years by very different people with very different agendas. And I celebrate it. It's our book that guides us. What's wonderful about the Bible is that it's material that made sense not to one generation or two generations or three, but many, many more. It stood the test of time. But again, if you look at the scriptures, you see that there are things where there's diametric opposition, and when that happens, you need to get on your knees and pray and be discerning and use your conscience and decide where God really is leading. And sometimes that's not the easiest thing in the world.
We have with us next Rob from South Jordan. Rob, good to have you with us.
Hi. I just happened to stumble upon this channel and started to watch the program, and I just have to say that I'm really impressed with Pastor Scott. He is so enlightened. It's such a breath of fresh air to see somebody who is really so tolerant and loving, propagates tolerance and liberty, and really is more Christ-like than I've seen on any show like this that I've seen in a long time, and I'm just impressed. I think if we had more leaders like him, I think we'd be in a lot better shape in this world.
Thank you. You made the statement earlier that you were staking your immortal soul on whether you are correct. And as a shepherd of Christ's sheep, you're betting their souls on it as well.
I'm
wouldn't you
just
say?
one pastor. I've been pastor of 7 churches now, so I don't, I was 13 years in one and 14 in another. So, but I've never been the only pastor anyone's ever had. I'm not saying that in order to say, well, it's not all on my watch. But God is so much bigger than any of us. And I understand at the end of the day that no matter what I preach or teach in my classes, that people go home and they have their own minds. I don't count myself as the last word in anybody's understanding of the Bible and God. Most people follow their own hearts.
I'm curious, John Knox is historically seen as the father of the Presbyterian Church. Do you see yourself in the same vein as Knox?
I can't say that I have studied Knox to a great degree, no. So I don't think I better even try to answer that one.
Okay.
He's a Scottish Presbyterian.
Yes. These changes in the mainline Presbyterian Church, you have this embracing of German higher critical views of the Bible, where there's a questioning of the authority of the Bible. Late 19th century, early 20th century, you get the Auburn Affirmation, I think, 1905. You end up with a move towards this skeptical view of the Bible. It has transformed a number of things about the church in terms of its confessions, things like this. The Westminster Confession got moved in, 67, to a book of confessions, none of which are actually binding in terms of subscription on the church. I'd like, in the few minutes that we've got left, to discuss one of the notable changes that has been in the newspapers. The Presbyterian Church USA, the mainline denomination, is following the lead of the Episcopal Church and the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America in terms of the ordination of homosexuals and lesbians. Can you comment on that in terms of how this view of truth fits with that?
It has more to do with how the church works. I'll say this. I was at, we haven't voted as an entire denomination to ordain gay and lesbian people yet. Our General Assembly, which is the every 2-year meeting in which decisions are made, said it's time that happened. And now the presbyteries, which are kind of like the states, are having to come up with a vote to go along with it or not. And many times the states or the presbyteries have not. This time it looks like it may very well come through. And yes, we might very well be following the Episcopal Church and others at this point. I was at the meeting of the General Assembly as a commissioner in 1996 when the denomination decided that gay and lesbian people should not be ordained, and it was a decision made on high by the General Assembly, and said, "Thou shalt not," pretty much said, "You shall not ordain these people." To simplify things, that's pretty much what was said. I was a bit horrified, mostly that the denomination, to my way of thinking, was willing to sell its own soul to come up with that, because our denomination has always believed that the people who decide whether one person or another should be ordained are always the people that know them and are closest to them, the people in the individual congregation and the people in their presbytery, where they can be seen to grow up and serve in the church, and have their gifts be examined and their hearts be pretty much open to those around them. To have the General Assembly, the big body, say, because of this one thing, you're not going to ordain somebody, again, seemed to me to be very much against Presbyterianism, where we follow our own conscience, and Jesus Christ is our Lord of our conscience, not the General Assembly. So I think it's been pretty much understood that that was a bad decision, and a very un-Presbyterian kind of decision. And just a few years ago, the General Assembly relented and came out and said that if a church has a scruple, a moral scruple about that law, then they can speak it and they can ordain whom they choose, knowing that other courts of the church might concur or not. So the whole thing for us had very much to do with the way we organize ourselves and how we believe God speaks to the heart.
And Presbytery of Utah has just voted, along with a bunch of other presbyteries, to do away with the fidelity, the requirement that pastors be faithful in marriage and chaste outside of marriage.
I don't think that's exactly, it sounds like,
Fidelity
anybody can
chastity.
do whatever they want. That's what it sounds like. No, we're actually pretty much working on whether or not we want to restructure our Book of Order. What I understand is that we are not making fidelity in marriage or chastity and singleness any less, important for people, knowing that those things are important in our lives. What we wanted to do was not use that as a hammer to club a particular minority of people in our denomination.
Let's try to squeeze in a couple of calls just before the end here. We have Evelyn from Salt Lake. Evelyn, good to have you with us.
What a marvelous fresh breath of air is this pastor. He is as godlike as ever God intended me or anyone I know to be. He is he's loving of everyone. We do not get a choice of whom we will treat poorly or whom we will choose to exalt. He does not make choices. God is in every word this man says. And if we could have more such as that, we wouldn't have so many people turning from churches. We wouldn't have so many people going away. They would be coming to. May many, many continue to come to this dear, beloved man. And his love for humanity, I feel his love for me. Thank you, Pastor.
Thank you, Evelyn.
We have Elias from Salt Lake. Elias, we're running out of time.
Hello?
You're on the air.
I can't hear you.
You're on the air.
Well, I just wanted to comment that it was interesting that here are two people of the same organization, Presbyterian, I understand, and yet you don't agree. And that's how it is all down the line. Religions all over the place just don't agree.
can't agree. That's why I'm agnostic.
Okay. Thank you, Elias. Elias, agnostics don't agree either. We're not of the same organization. The Orthodox Presbyterian Church was founded in 1936. J. Gresham Machen, former professor at Princeton Seminary, was disciplined by the General Assembly because he had set up an independent board of Presbyterian missions. They said that this was a challenge to Presbyterianism because things had become very bureaucratic. They wanted to have an organization to support missionaries who actually were teaching the historic gospel. As a consequence of challenging the money flow, they said, you must cease and desist. He said, you can't constitutionally do this without a trial. And they said, we administratively demand it. He did not submit to that, and they ultimately kicked him out. In order to leave the Presbyterian Church USA, our congregations had to forfeit, pastors had to forfeit their pensions. Just about every church had to forfeit their property. But we stand for the faith once for all delivered to the saints in our belief. But
and I'd like to apologize on the basis the mainline church for doing that. We don't do that anymore. We let churches go, take their property and pensions with them now.
Presbyterian laymen would disagree, but we're about out of time. There are a lot of lawsuits going on over those matters. Pleasure to have you with us, and glad that we were able to have a respectful conversation in spite of disagreeing on such fundamental matters.
That.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
We invite you to worship with us Sunday mornings. We are sponsored by Christ Presbyterian Church, of which I am the pastor. We are a congregation of the Orthodox Presbyterian denomination. We believe the Bible to be our only infallible rule of faith and practice. We believe we are all sinners, saved by grace alone, through faith alone, in Jesus Christ alone. We meet Sunday mornings at 11 a.m., Sunday evenings at 5:30 p.m. at 8630 West, 2700 South. We have a sister congregation, Berean Presbyterian, that meets at 9 a.m. at 3350 Harrison Boulevard in Ogden. They were organized last night as a particular congregation with their own ruling elders, so we're rejoicing with them in that. We have a mission work in Utah County, and we also have a Bible study that we're trying to organize up in Heber. If you know of anyone who might be interested, we invite you to give us a call or check out our website, www.christpres.net, or give us a phone call at 801-969-7948. We hope to have you with us next week, and until then, we wish you the Lord's greatest blessings. Good night.